All right, we stay in the NBA and we move back east, where two sputtering contenders met in Boston last night. That was the Celtics getting a 118-112 win over the Pacers. The Celtics had lost three in a row, but they got a vintage performance from Kemba Walker, who scored a season-high 32 points. The Pacers did get 24 from Domantas Sabonis, but Miles Turner and Malcolm Brogdon, they struggled, combining for just 9 for 30 from the floor. The Pacers lost their second straight game and have dropped 3 of 4 now. Both teams are just below 500, and get this, Drink, seeds 4 through 10 in the East. They're separated by just one game. All right, Drink, who is more likely to rise out of this Eastern Conference mediocrity, the Celtics or Pacers?
All right, so before I get to the answer to that question, your lead in is quite on point, and I just want to point out one part of this lead in. You said seeds 4 through 10 in the Eastern Conference is separated by one game. Man, that sounds familiar. And for all the people that want to rant and rave about, the Eastern Conference being better, this is the reason people like Skip Bayless and other, media personalities call the Eastern Conference the Eastern Conference, because no matter who joins the party, it's always the same outlook. You know what I'm saying? So no matter what ingredient you put in that pie, it always come out similar to be the same. That's not going to cut it. We expect at some point the Eastern Conference to build itself up to where you don't have teams that's below 500 in the playoffs. And even if you do, it should be like seed 7 and 8 or just 8.
I feel
Not
like,
for
I feel like the last couple of years we've been led to believe that the East is catching up to the West, and
right.
then you just pick up the standings on any other day, and it's like they really only have three teams above 500.
Right.
That's same old, same
So,
old.
same old, same old. So what's the excuse now? So with that said, to answer all that, it's the Celtics for sure. Listen, here's the deal. And before I, jump into this vintage performance by Kemba Walker, I guess I'll start with the Pacers on this. You said it yourself. You take Sabonis out, what did you really have? I've been hearing about Miles Turner being one of the best big men in the NBA, and he's been getting snubbed for All-Star appearances for the last 4 or 5 years. Then you got Malcolm Brogdon. We done seen Brogdon play a lot better than he's been playing, but it seems to me maybe that additional role as not only being a role player but actually being a dependable, somewhat borderline star or whatnot for Indiana is starting to take a little toll on Brogdon. Brogdon don't look the same he looked when he was with Milwaukee, when all he had to do was wait on Giannis to throw him the ball while he's wide open in the corner and play that good perimeter defense. It's a little different. Game that changed up for Brogdon a little bit, so you can see that. I do got a question. Do T.J. Warren still play for the Pacers?
I want to say he's got to be hurt right now, right?
I ain't heard much from him, and he was sensational in the bubble. That bubble Warren was sensational, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, he had surgery. I think he had surgery in late December. That's what I'm getting right now.
Okay, well, it looked like the whole team getting surgery, but that's neither
Yes.
here nor there. So that enough about the Pacers. They are what we are. I mean, right? I think last night they was like the 4th or 5th seed in the East. We know that's not sustainable. Cool, that looks good on paper, but I don't. At the end of the day, I'm not even sure if the Pacers make the playoffs, and if they do, it'll be 6, 7, or 8 seed. It won't be any type of home court advantage or anything like that. And therefore, that leads me into my next point. The Celtics will be out of mediocrity. Why do I say that? First of all, the Celtics have at least three players that have been all-stars at some point of their career. Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Right? So if you just look at that, you say, dang, okay, they got three guys that used to be all-stars, 2 of which they're young and ascending into their prime, and then one that you could probably either say he didn't met his prime or he's coming down a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. Kemba Walker. I mean, I don't know what to make of Kemba Walker right now. So with that said, and then let's look at, you got a young budding head coach that seems to be getting the most out of his team. It's always missing a little something. What is that little something? Let's talk about it. This is why players like Marcus Smart get paid in the NBA. I hear a lot like players like him, players like Draymond Green. It was another player that I heard where people like they suck. They're not even that good, but they talk and they do this, and you always gotta hear them. Let me tell you something. The NBA, sometimes it's not all about how much you can score. Yeah, is that probably a number one, characteristic, a number one attribute that you need is to be able to score the ball? Yes. But when you bring those intangibles like those guys do, you're gonna get paid. Somebody's gonna pay you. Why do you think Chris Paul is getting paid so much money and he hasn't won anything of any significance? Because it's something to be said about leadership. It's something to be said about setting the right example, et cetera, et cetera. And it's something about having that tough guy. You can say whatever you want about Draymond, but I tell you what, you go up there and you go talk to Steph or somebody like that crazy and watch Draymond come across that court, and you know what time it is. I want all the smoke. So, with that, getting back on subject, the Celtics, they're going to be the team that rise. I think Indiana is going to falter. They're just too good. They just got to figure it out. They're still figuring it out, I think. And they're going to be the team. Vintage, hey, Kemba Walker. Because last time we talked about the Celtics, I had a lot of disrespectful stuff to say about you. But this is why. This is why. We know what you can do. We know what you can bring to the table. I'm glad you brought it to the table because with the way Jason Tatum and Brown played last night, y'all would have took the L. But you came to the table, you played good ball, and I think this is a microcosm look at what the Celtics could be if they can be consistent. So what I seen last night, I think the Celtics can rise up and actually get up to where they can meet those top three teams, the Nets, the Bucks, the 76ers. They can get, going into that tier of the Eastern Conference at some point. But right now, like you said, they just in the pot with everybody else. Let's see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that if you had to put money on which team will, rise up and, maybe join some of those top three teams that, look like contenders right now, it would be the Celtics. And even though they've struggled, I think the number last night, they started 8-3, they've been 7-14 since. A lot of that has to do with Marcus Smart being out. A lot of it has to do with Kemba Walker still rounding into form. And I think lately it appears he's back on track. I think on our last show we were talking about how dismal he was against the Utah Jazz. It was a 2-for-12 shooting night. Since then, he has scored 21, 25, 17, 28, 14, 21, and last night's punctuation or exclamation point of 32. Mm-hmm. So Kemba Walker appears to have gotten this thing turned around, and at no bigger time because Jason Tatum was not very good last night. And Jaylen Brown, I wouldn't say he was awful, but he just wasn't as assertive as he's been. And Tatum and Brown, it's interesting. It's just interesting to see how it's shaken out so far for Boston because these guys, they look like they're going to be perennial all-stars now for years to come. They're both averaging 25 points per game, right on the nose. And with their ascent to, what I'd probably say is A- level players, you would think that the rest of the team would come with them. It just hasn't happened like that so far. But I think Kemba Walker looks like he could be the X factor, perhaps. But he's got to maintain his B to B plus play, and Marcus Smart coming back, that's going to be a big deal. And I think they're just too talented to continue to sport a 500 record. I'm looking at guys like Daniel Tice. As time goes on, I get more impressed with him every game. Very versatile on the defensive end. He can switch out and keep guards, from just blowing by him. Got a little bit of a rim protector in him. He looks like he's developing a little bit more of an offensive game. They ran some really nice high-low stuff with him and Robert Williams. Willing passer, has 3-point range, a modern NBA big. And speaking of Robert Williams, he's another guy who, I get more impressed with him as time goes on. I think he's a guy that needs more minutes. I like Tristan Thompson, but when you look at with what they did with their respective minutes last night, Robert Williams he looks like he's more more productive. Plays above the rim. He's another guy who can protect the basket defensively. I like these two big guys. And by the way, it was nice to see a little bit of production from Jeff Teague, who hasn't had the most splendid of seasons.
Right.
So Boston, I think they're just way too good, despite the fact that their record just isn't what you um, would expect. But Marcus Smart coming back, as we well know, he's one of those glue guys to where like his impact goes well beyond the box score. And when he comes back, and we continue to see Kemba Walker play more consistently at what he's capable of doing, I think in the end Boston's going to be fine. They may not be able to catch the top three teams right now, but they right now, if you had to pick a team out of that, 4 to 10 jumbo sandwich that they got going, it's got to be. I think it's got to be Boston at this particular moment in time. Indiana, Indiana's somewhat interesting. I don't think Indiana's done. I think Indiana will make the playoffs when it's all said and done. I think, although I don't think there's been a return date for T.J. Warren yet, I do think he'll return at the latter stages of the regular season. He'll give him a big boost. I'm not sure if Karis LeVert comes back, but if they get both of those guys back late, I think they'll be able to sneak into the playoffs. Maybe they'll be down to 6-7 range, but I still think they'll get in. But one of the things we talked about in the last segment about Portland kind of being injury riddled, same thing. I think the same thing can be said about Indiana. Whether it's
Right.
Victor Oladipo, now it's T.J. Warren, and you think about it, the trade that sent Victor Oladipo to Houston, I believe it was.
Right.
They get a young gem who could like be a Victor Oladipo, perhaps in Karis LeVert, and he goes through the medical process, and we all know how that's turned out. I'm not sure what his return looks like, but if they can get those two guys back, and oh, by the way, Miles Turner, Malcolm Brogdon, they're not going to play that way on most nights. Malcolm Brogdon, he's averaging 21 a game this year. I think his efficiency has dropped since his last season in Milwaukee, but he's more than capable. And the only thing I'll say about Miles Turner is I feel like the when they brought over Sabonis, it made Miles Turner more of a perimeter player. And I talked to a guy who, a friend of mine who is a Pacers fan. He often laments that Miles Turner is just shooting too many threes, and it's just one of those things that it's almost got to the point in the modern NBA that you can only afford to have one guy in the paint. And the Pacers are I think they're better served to have Sabonis be that guy. But I think it is to the detriment of Miles Turner. I just don't think the 3-point thing is really to his strength, although he's a capable 3-point shooter. But I'd like to see him operate more in the paint. But yeah, in the end, Indiana they couldn't do enough last night offensively. They weren't all that efficient. They made up for it by being absolutely outstanding from the free throw line. But they surprisingly they still have a little bit of depth with Aaron Holiday and Justin Holiday. Both of those guys were productive last night, but they just needed a little bit more from their second and third guys last night, which were Miles Turner and Malcolm Brogdon, and they just didn't get it.